his senses did not deceive him, came from the western shore. All who are accustomed to that particular sound will understand how readily the ear receives it, and how easy it is to distinguish the tread which breaks the branch from every other noise of the forest. "There is the footstep of a man on the bank," said Pathfinder to Jasper, speaking in neither a whisper nor yet in a voice loud enough to be heard at any distance. "Can the accursed Iroquois have crossed the river already, with their arms and without a boat?" "It may be the Delaware. He would follow us, of course, down this bank, and would know where to look for us. Let me draw closer into the shore and reconnoitre." "Go, boy, but be light with the paddle, and on no account venture ashore on an uncertainty." "Is this prudent?" demanded Mabel, with an impetuosity that rendered her incautious in modulating her sweet voice. "Very imprudent, if you speak so loud, fair one. I like your voice, which is soft and pleasing, after the listening so long to the tones of men, but it must not be heard too much or too freely just now. Your father, the honest sergeant, will tell you, when you meet him, that silence is a double virtue on a trail. Go, Jasper, and do justice to your own character for prudence." 10 anxious minutes succeeded the disappearance of the canoe of Jasper, which glided away from that of the Pathfinder so noiselessly that it had been swallowed up in the gloom before Mabel allowed herself to believe the young man would really venture alone on a service which struck her imagination as singularly dangerous. During this time the party continued to float with the current, no one speaking, and it might almost be said, no one breathing, so strong was the general desire to catch the minutest sound that should come from the shore. But the same solemn, we might, indeed, say sublime, quiet reigned as before, the washing of the water as it piled up against some slight obstruction, and the sighing of the trees, alone interrupting the slumbers of the forest. At the end of the period mentioned, the snapping of the dried branches was again faintly heard, and the Pathfinder fancied that the sound of smothered voices reached him. "I may be mistaken," he said, "for the thoughts often fancy what the heart wishes, but these were notes like the low tones of the Delaware." "Do the dead of the savages ever walk?" demanded Cap. "Ay, and run, too, in their happy hunting grounds, but nowhere else. A redskin finishes with the earth, after the breath quits the body. It is not one of his gifts to linger around his wigwam when his hour has passed." "I see some object on the water," whispered Mabel, whose eye had not ceased to dwell on the body of gloom, with close intensity, since the disappearance of Jasper. "It is the canoe," returned the guide, greatly relieved. "All must be safe, or we should have heard from the lad." In another minute the two canoes, which became visible to those they carried only as they drew near each other, again floated side by side, and the form of Jasper was recognized at the stern of his own boat. The figure of a second man was seated in the bow, and as the young sailor so wielded his paddle as to bring the face of his companion near the eyes of the Pathfinder and Mabel, they both recognized the person of the Delaware. "Chingachgook, my brother!" said the guide, in the dialect of the other's people, a tremor shaking his voice that betrayed the strength of his feelings. "Chief of the Mohicans, my heart is very glad. Often have we passed through blood and strife together, but I was afraid it was never to be so again." "Hugh! The Mingos are squaws. 3 of their scalps hang at my girdle. They do not know how to strike the great serpent of the Delawares. Their hearts have no blood, and their thoughts are on their return path, across the waters of the Great Lake." "Have you been among them, chief? And what has become of the warrior who was in the river?" "He has turned into a fish, and lies at the bottom with the eels. Let his brothers bait their hooks for him. Pathfinder, I have counted the enemy, and have touched their rifles." "Ah, I thought he would be venturesome," exclaimed the guide in English. "The risky fellow has been in the midst of them, and has brought us back their whole history. Speak, Chingachgook, and I will make our friends as knowing as ourselves." The Delaware now related in a low, earnest manner the substance of all his discoveries, since he was last seen struggling with his foe in the river. Of the fate of his antagonist he said no more, it not being usual for a warrior to boast in his more direct and useful narratives. As soon as he had conquered in that fearful strife, however, he swam to the eastern shore, landed with caution, and wound his way in among the Iroquois, concealed by the darkness, undetected, and in the main even unsuspected. Once, indeed, he had been questioned, but answering that he was Arrowhead, no further inquiries were made. By the passing remarks he soon ascertained that the party was out expressly to intercept Mabel and her uncle, concerning whose rank, however, they had evidently been deceived. He also ascertained enough to justify the suspicion that Arrowhead had betrayed them to their enemies, for some motive that it was now not easy to reach, as he had not yet received the reward of his services. Pathfinder communicated no more of his intelligence to his companions than he thought might relieve their apprehensions, intimating at the same time that now was the moment for exertion, the Iroquois not having yet entirely recovered from the confusion created by their losses. "We shall find them at the rift, I make no manner of doubt," continued he, "and there it will be our fate to pass them, or to fall into their hands. The distance to the garrison will then be so short, that I have been thinking of a plan of landing with Mabel myself, that I may take her in by some of the byways, and leave the canoes to their chances in the rapids." "It will never succeed, Pathfinder," eagerly interrupted Jasper. "Mabel is not strong enough to tramp in the woods in a night like this. Put her in my skiff, and I will lose my life, or carry her through the rift safely, dark as it is." "No doubt you will, lad. No one doubts your willingness to do anything to serve the Sergeant's daughter; but it must be the eye of Providence, and not your own, that will take you safely through the Oswego rift in a night like this." "And who will lead her safely to the garrison if she land? Is not the night as dark on shore as on the water? Or do you think I know less of my calling than you know of yours?" "Spiritedly said, lad. But if I should lose my way in the dark, and I believe no man can say truly that such a thing ever yet happened to me, but if I should lose my way, no other harm would come of it than to pass a night in the forest, whereas a false turn of the paddle or a broad sheer of the canoe would put you and the young woman into the river, out of which it is more than probable the Sergeant's daughter would never come alive." "I will leave it to Mabel herself. I am certain that she will feel more secure in the canoe." "I have great confidence in you both," answered the girl, "and have no doubts that either will do all he can to prove to my father how much he values him. But I confess I should not like to quit the canoe, with the certainty we have of there being enemies like those we have seen in the forest. But my uncle can decide for me in this matter." "I have no liking for the woods," said Cap, "while one has a clear drift like this on the river. Besides, Master Pathfinder, to say nothing of the savages, you overlook the sharks." "Sharks! Who ever heard of sharks in the wilderness?" "Ay, sharks, or bears, or wolves, no matter what you call a thing, so it has the mind and power to bite." "Lord, Lord, man, do you dread any creature that is to be found in the American forest? A catamount is a skeary animal, I will allow, but then it is nothing in the hands of a practised hunter. Talk of the Mingos and their deviltries if you will, but do not raise a false alarm about bears and wolves." "Ay, ay, Master Pathfinder, this is all well enough for you, who probably know the name of every creature you would meet. Use is everything, and it makes a man bold when he might otherwise be bashful. I have known seamen in the low latitudes swim for hours at a time among sharks 15 or 20 feet long." "This is extraordinary!" exclaimed Jasper, who had not yet acquired that material part of his trade. the ability to spin